The Rebbe starts off the Sikha by saying that we know what Chazal tell us regarding Noach, that he did not daven for the people of his generation, different to Moshe Rabbeinu, who did daven even for those that had worshipped the Egel. In regards to this, we find the machloikas in the Zohar between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yehuda says that the fact that Noach didn't daven for his generation as Moshe did was because Moshe actually davened relying on the schus of the Avos of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Noach clearly did not have that, so it's not his fault that he wasn't able to daven for the people of the generation. On the other hand, Rabbi Yitzchak says, no, Noach nevertheless should have davened for the people of the generation. The Rebbe brings from his father, from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who says that this machloikas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak is really a machloikas based on their own characteristics, their own character traits. Rabbi Yehuda was a man of chesed, and therefore he's looking for the schus, for the merit of Noach. And that's why he's saying it wasn't Noach's fault. Rabbi Yitzchak, on the other hand, was a man of gevura, more of judgment, severity, etc. And therefore, he's looking more at the negative side of it, that nevertheless he should have davened for the people of his generation. The Rebbe asks, we know that there's a Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, it's a psak of Torah, you always have to judge every person favorably. Even if a person is from the midah of Gevura, you still have to judge people favorably. So why is Rabbi Yitzchak almost looking to judge Noach in a negative way? The Rebbe asks a similar question on the very beginning of the parsha. There we also have a machloikas. The pasuk says Noach was a tzaddik, and then it says b'doi roisav in his generation. So here again we have a machloikas where some chachamim say this as a praise, that he was a tzaddik even in his generation, even in this lowly generation. How much more so if he would be in a generation of tzaddikim, he would be even a greater tzaddik. And some expound this word in a negative way, saying no, only in his generation he was a tzaddik, but in Abraham's generation he would be nothing. And here we again have the same question. If we have two options of how to learn this word, why would we choose to learn it in a negative way rather than in a positive way? Especially we know that the Torah avoids speaking negatively even about a non-kosher animal. And here you're saying you're adding a word b'deroisav just to say something negative about Noach? Says the Rebbe, the explanation could be understood based on something that was also explained in other sichos, that this rule that the Torah doesn't speak negatively about things, will try to avoid saying a negative thing, is only when the Torah is recounting a story or something like that. But if the Torah needs to give us a clear-cut directive, then Torah will always be very clear and not just ambiguous in order to make sure that we understand it clearly, even if we have to say something negative. So the Rebbe applies the same thing over here. The fact that the Torah is adding the word b'doiroisov, and it's coming to bring out some sort of disgrace about Noach, is in order to ensure that we don't make a mistake in a practical way of acting. And that is, we do find in regards to Noach's conduct regarding certain things that he wasn't a tzaddik in the most perfect way. The Rebbe does not give examples in our Sikha, although in the footnote the Rebbe references a number of things. Amongst them, one of them, for example, is the fact that Noach didn't have complete full emunah. Even when the Eibishter told him he was going to be a mabul, he wasn't going into the teva until he was forced by the water. So the Rebbe says we find certain things that Noach was not 100% perfect. If the Torah would describe Noach as a tzaddik tamim, as a complete tzaddik, without telling us that it was only b'deroisav, only relative to his generation, people mistakenly could think that this is the way a complete tzaddik acts. And therefore we need to bring out, in a certain sense, some shortcoming of Noach to understand about the lessons we'll learn from Noach, to understand that this is still not the way a perfect tzaddik needs to be acting. Says the Rebbe, based on this, we could take it actually a step further. That when the Chachamim say that the Torah is saying these words l'doiroisov, to bring out something negative, it doesn't mean to bring out something negative actually about Noach himself. Rather, it's mainly just, we're expounding the word in a negative way for our benefit, so to speak. In other words, to make sure that we take the correct lesson. In other words, we're not necessarily even saying that there's a machloikas regarding the level of Noach's, what kind of great tzaddik Noach was. In other words, everyone will agree that Noach is not on the same level of Avram's tzidkus. But at the same time, it's also not his fault because he's in such a lowly generation. The difference between these two opinions is, what is the Torah trying to tell us with the word B'deirasav? So one opinion is saying, is just trying to bring out how great Noach is. Wow, in his generation, he's a tzaddik. The other opinion is coming to say, no, it's coming to bring out the negative aspect of it. In other words, what we should learn from it is to make sure that we don't think he's such a great tzaddik, so then we don't make the wrong conclusions. And therefore, says the Rebbe, as far as Noach himself is concerned, no one's saying something bad about him. Because since he was in that generation, so obviously he couldn't be the same tzaddik as Avram. The Torah is only coming to bring out and make sure that we understand that this is still not the ultimate level of being a tzaddik. The Rebbe applies now this same idea to the machloikes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak about Noach not davening first generation. Again, the Rebbe is saying that there's not an actual argument of whether he could have or should have davened. Even Rabbi Yitzchak, who says he should have davened, understands and would agree that the reason Noach didn't daven is because he actually couldn't daven that because he didn't have the schus avos. But again, Rabbi Yitzchak is coming to teach us that we shouldn't take the wrong lesson out of it. We shouldn't think that there's no problem with that Noach is not davening. And therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak is saying, we need to darshan, we need to learn from this, that this is not the way of being. And that's why he's darshaning in a certain negative way, because we need to always make sure to daven for another Yid, no matter what. And that's why what Rabbi Yitzchak said is not a contradiction to the concept of judging people favorably. He's just, again, he's because he understands, and he's saying that he also realizes that Noach couldn't have acted differently. It's just to make sure, again, that we don't take the wrong lesson from this. In fact, says the Rebbe, if we're not going to ensure that other people don't act this way, in other words, if people might take a lesson from Noach and saying, look, we don't have to daven for other people, that could end up being a choiv, a negative for Noach. In other words, that what Noach did ends up being a stumbling block for other people. And therefore, that itself is the schus of Noach. Noach himself, in a certain sense, wants that we should daven for the people of our generation. And to say that what Noach did was, in a certain sense, wrong. In order to, again, make sure that other people don't act that way. And says the Rebbe, by doing this itself, we actually ensure that what Noach did is not a negative thing. In other words, not in the most perfect way. And therefore, we are going to act in ways that are different to the way Noach acted. And that itself will bring a shleimus, a perfection, in Noach's avodah himself. And the Rebbe finishes off with a hira practically to us. Sometimes we try to inspire people, we try to have influence around us, etc., etc. And on reasons that are seemingly not up to us, we're not seemingly being successful. And a person could say to himself, look, I do whatever I can. Comes along Rabbi Yitzchak with this hira and says, maybe you really did whatever you can. Maybe you really tried very hard, but we still need to know that we cannot stay there. We cannot be satisfied with the situation. We always need to make sure to keep on davening and do whatever we can for everybody else. And this itself causes the schus that Hashem ultimately removes all of these other reasons, these causes that might be causing any negative situations, and gives the Yid the opportunity to be able to daven for the people around him and to affect them that they should do tshuva. And ultimately, of course, through that, coming as the Rambam paskins in Sefer of Halachis, that the Torah promised that the Yidden are going to do tshuva at the very end of their galus, and immediately they'll be redeemed.